Danny Carver took the job because it didn't ask anything of him. 8 hours, walk the perimeter, sign the log, go home. No one coding in front of him. No one's hand to hold in the back of a rig, while his partner drove and the hospital was 6 minutes away and 6 minutes was 4 too many. Just a building and a flashlight and a clipboard with boxes to check. The Harwell Foods plant ran 3 shifts. Day and swing were normal enough. 40 workers coming and going, packing lunches, complaining about parking, doing what people do when there's still people on the clock. Danny walked among them his first 2 weeks and felt the specific comfort of being invisible. A uniform that said security, a face that said don't bother me. Nobody bothered him. The night shift was different. He noticed it the 3rd week, the first time his rotation pushed him to the overnight hours. 20 workers on the production floor from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. They came in through the south entrance at 9:45, changed into their floor gear in the locker room, and were at their stations by 10 without exception. No stragglers. No one stopping to check their phone or finish a conversation. They moved to their positions the way water moves downhill, like it wasn't a decision. Danny walked the floor at 11 and watched them work. The line ran constantly. Cans moving on a belt, filled, sealed, labeled, packed into cases. The workers stood at their stations and did their part of it. Repetitive work, same motion every few seconds, the kind of thing that should produce small variations. A pause to stretch, a moment to shift weight from one foot to the other. The micro adjustments a body makes when it's been doing the same thing for an hour. He didn't see any of that. He told himself it was just a disciplined crew. Some foreman ran a tight floor. He'd seen it in other facilities during his 2 years of overnight security work before Harwell. It wasn't impossible. He signed the log. Floor 1. All clear. He went back to the booth and drank his coffee and didn't think about it again until the following week. The foreman's name was Greer. He was a big man, not tall but wide, with the kind of stillness in his face that Danny associated with people who had decided something a long time ago and stopped reconsidering. He did a floor walk at the start of every night shift, moving between the stations, checking something on the clipboard he carried. He never spoke to the workers. They never spoke to him. The other thing he carried was a controller. Danny saw it the second overnight rotation. Greer had it clipped to his belt on the right side, a black box, old-looking, with a small screen and rows of buttons. Most of the buttons were covered with electrical tape. A frequency dial on the side, the kind you'd see on equipment from 30 years ago. Danny assumed it was something to do with the line machinery. Remote operation of some kind. He didn't ask about it. It wasn't his floor. The thing that stayed with him from that second night wasn't the controller. It was the brake. At 2 a.m., a buzzer sounded. The line stopped. On the day and swing shifts, Danny had watched workers pull out phones and sandwiches and move toward the break room in loose, relieved groups the moment that buzzer went. The night shift didn't move. They stood at their stations with their hands at their sides and waited. 2 minutes passed. Then Greer walked to the center of the floor, looked at his controller, and pressed something. The line started again. The workers went back to their motions. No break, no food, no water. Danny watched from the catwalk above and thought about a dozen explanations and settled on none of them. The 4th overnight rotation, he started paying attention the way he'd been trained to pay attention, not looking directly at what bothered him but cataloging, building a picture. The night shift workers never spoke to each other, not a word, not a gesture, not a look exchanged between stations. They never adjusted their clothing, never pushed up a sleeve or rolled a shoulder. A person standing in one position for 8-hour shifts constantly. The body demands it. These 20 people stood as still between their repetitive motions as they did during them. Their eyes were open and focused on their work. That was the thing Danny kept coming back to. Focused wasn't the right word. Directed. Like the focus wasn't coming from inside but from somewhere else, pointed at the work from a different location entirely. He'd worked a cardiac arrest once. A man at his kitchen table, 3 minutes down when Danny arrived, technically back by the time they reached the hospital. The man had been awake for the transport. His eyes had been open, directed at the ceiling, present in the way a camera is present, recording but not there. The night shift workers had those eyes. He told himself he was importing trauma into a situation that didn't need it. He'd been told by 2 separate therapists that this was something he did. He signed the log. Floor 1. All clear. He went home in the gray early morning and slept badly and woke up thinking about the brake buzzer and the 2 minutes and Greer's hand on the controller. The collapse happened on his 5th overnight rotation. He was on the catwalk when it happened. Station 7, a woman maybe 30 years old, simply went down. No warning, no stumble. There and then not there, her body on the concrete floor between the belt and the equipment housing. Danny was already moving for the stairs. The other 19 workers didn't move. The line kept running. The cans kept moving. 18 people continued their work as if nothing had changed, and 1 person continued lying on the floor. Danny was halfway down the stairs when he saw Greer come through the floor door. Greer walked to Station 7 without hurrying. He looked at the woman on the floor. He looked at his controller. He pressed something. The woman stood up. Not the way a person stands up after collapsing. No hands on the floor, no gathering of limbs, no slow negotiation with gravity that getting up requires. She went from horizontal to vertical in one motion, the way a marionette goes up when the string is pulled. Her feet found the floor and she turned back to the belt and resumed her motion. Danny stopped on the stairs. He stood there for a long time. Then he went back up to the catwalk and stood against the railing and looked at his hands and thought about what he had just watched and what it meant, and how many ways there were to explain it that didn't mean what he knew it meant. He found none. He almost quit that morning. He drove home with the radio on loud and told himself he was going to call the staffing agency when the sun came up and give his notice, and that would be the end of it. He had no obligation to understand what was happening at Harwell Foods. He had no obligation to the night shift workers or their blank-directed eyes or the way the woman at Station 7 had risen from the floor. He made coffee. He sat at the kitchen table. He thought about calling his former partner from the paramedic days, a woman named Solis who had stayed in the job and had better instincts than he did about most things. He thought about what he would say to Solis. I watched a woman collapse and her foreman pointed a remote control at her and she stood up. He thought about what Solis would say back. He thought about the woman at Station 7, whether there was something left in there, behind those directed eyes, that knew what was happening to it. He didn't quit. He went back the following week with his phone in his breast pocket, camera running, angled through the gap in his uniform's front placket. He walked the catwalk slowly. He filmed what he could. He also started noticing other things. The lockers the night shift used were in a separate room from the day workers. He'd assumed it was just a space issue. Now he got there early and waited down the hall and watched the night shift arrive. They came in through the south entrance the same way, 9:45, single file. Greer was behind them, not leading, behind. The controller was in his hand, not on his belt. They changed in the locker room. Danny watched through the gap in the door. Their movements were precise, efficient. No one fumbled with buttons or took a moment to check their reflection or sat on the bench to change their shoes. They dressed the way the machines on the floor operated, purposefully, without hesitation, without the small human inefficiencies that dressing involves. He looked at their necks when they came out. Under the collars of their floor shirts, high-necked, all of them, which he hadn't registered before as unusual and now couldn't stop registering, he could see the edges of something, dark metal against the skin, flush with the throat. He only saw it on 2 of them clearly, where the shirt sat slightly wrong. But he looked at the others and thought about neck sizes and collar cuts, and the specific height at which all 20 of them wore their shirts buttoned. He went to his booth and sat very still for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and looked at the footage. Greer's controller, the workers moving, the precise choreography of people who were not choosing their movements. He called the police non-emergency line. He described what he'd seen. The officer on the line asked him 3 questions, each one a little more careful than the last, and then told him someone would follow up. The way he said it told Danny that no one would follow up. He thought about Solis again, about calling her, about calling anyone. His shift ended. He went to his car. He sat in the parking lot and watched the south entrance, and at 6 a.m. the night shift came out in single file and got into a white van he hadn't seen before, parked at the far end of the lot, and the van drove away and Greer walked to his own car alone. Danny took a photo of the van's plates. Then he went back inside. He didn't go to the catwalk. He went to the production floor. It was empty now, the day's shift not due for an hour. The line was still. He walked the length of it slowly, 20 stations. The motions each person made, repeated across 8 hours, left traces, worn patches on the floor where feet had stood, slight marks on the equipment from the same hands in the same places thousands of times. He stopped at Station 7. There was a small dark stain on the concrete, rust-colored, the size of a handprint, roughly, where the woman's head had landed when she fell. He crouched down and looked at it, and thought about the sound it must have made, whether she'd felt it, whether feeling it was something that still happened to her, or whether Greer had toggled that off the way you toggle off a light. He stood up and went to Greer's office. The door was unlocked. A small room off the main floor, a desk, a chair, a filing cabinet, a corkboard with production schedules pinned to it. He went through the desk drawers quickly and found nothing. The filing cabinet had personnel files. He found the night shift workers' files and photographed them. Names, addresses, emergency contacts. In the bottom drawer, under a tray of pens and paper clips, was a collar. Cast iron, from the look of it. A numbered metal tag, small and dense in his hand, heavier than it should be for its size. He could see the seam where the electronics were housed inside the metal. A small port on the back, the size of a shirt button, that he recognized after a moment as a charging port. He put it back exactly where he found it. He left the office and walked back through the empty floor and out through the south entrance into the early morning and sat in his car and thought about 20 people in a white van, right now, somewhere. He thought about the emergency contacts in those files, parents, siblings, spouses, people who presumably believed their family member went to work at Harwell Foods and came home and was fine. He thought about what coming home looked like if Greer let you come home. Whether you ate dinner, whether you slept, whether you sat across from the person who loved you and looked at them with directed eyes while something deep inside tried to remember how to say "help me." He started the car. He drove to the police station in person this time. He was still in the parking lot of the police station, talking himself into going inside, when his phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "You left through the wrong door, Mr. Carver." He looked up. The white van was parked across the street. He had 3 seconds to process that before the south entrance of the police station opened and 2 of the night shift workers came out, not in their floor gear, in street clothes, moving with that same precise, directed quality that had no business being on a public sidewalk in daylight. He put the car in reverse. The van pulled out at the same moment. He ran 2 red lights getting back to the plant. He didn't know why the plant, instinct, maybe, or the specific logic of panic, which is sometimes smarter than thought. He needed space. He needed a building he knew the layout of. He came in through the north entrance, the one the day shift used. The day workers were at their stations. Normal sounds, conversation, the line running, a radio somewhere playing something he couldn't identify. He moved through them fast, ignoring the looks, heading for the production floor's far side. He didn't make it. The night shift came in through the south entrance. All 20 of them, street clothes, The same precise movement, spreading across the floor in a pattern that within seconds Danny understood was designed to cut off the exits. The day workers stopped and stared, and someone said something, and then the night shift was among them, and the day workers were going down fast, dropped by hands that moved without hesitation and without malice, which was somehow worse than if there'd been anger in it. Danny ran for the catwalk stairs. He got halfway up before one of them caught his ankle. He went down hard on the metal steps, caught himself on his forearms, and kicked back and connected with something, and the grip released. He scrambled up the rest of the stairs and onto the catwalk and looked down. Greer was on the floor below. He had the controller in his hand. He was looking up at Danny with that still face and pressing something on the controller, and Danny felt nothing, which meant the collar in the desk drawer was the only one unaccounted for, and it was still in the desk drawer and not around his neck. 4 of the night shift workers were on the catwalk stairs. Danny ran. The catwalk ran the length of the building and connected to a maintenance walkway on the far end that led to a fire door and a set of exterior stairs. He knew this because he'd walked it every shift for 6 weeks and had always figured the catwalk was an escape route if he ever needed one. He needed one. He hit the maintenance walkway and heard the catwalk shaking behind him with 4 sets of feet moving in that terrible coordinated way, and he didn't look back. The fire door had a crashed bar. He hit it with both arms and it gave, and the alarm screamed, and he was on the exterior stairs and going down. He hit the ground running. Behind him he heard the fire door open again. He heard feet on the metal stairs. He did not hear breathing, which was the worst part, because running people breathe. You can hear the effort in it. There was no effort in what was behind him. Just feet on stairs and then feet on asphalt, steady and relentless and paced exactly to the speed Greer had set. Danny ran for the fence line on the north side of the property. Chain link 8 feet, the kind of fence that looks worse than it is. He hit it at full speed and went up it with his fingers and toes finding gaps and the top catching his palm as he went over, and then he was on the other side and on the ground and up again and into the scrubland behind the plant. He ran until the sound stopped. Then he kept running. He made it to a gas station on Route 12, 2 miles from the plant. He used the payphone. He hadn't known it still worked, hadn't known he still remembered how to use one, and called Solis. She didn't ask many questions. That was why he'd called her. She drove out and found him sitting on the curb by the air pump with his hands wrapped in paper towels from the bathroom. The palm Greer's fence had opened, still sluggishly bleeding. She looked at him for a moment before she said anything. "How bad?" "I'm okay." "That's not what I asked." He told her. All of it. He watched her face while he talked. She had a paramedic's face, trained to stay neutral, trained to assess rather than react. It slipped twice. Once at the woman standing up from the floor, once at the text message. "You left through the wrong door, Mr. Carver." When he finished, she was quiet for a while. "The footage," she said. "On my phone. Still on my phone." "Okay." She stood up. "Let's go somewhere and figure out what to do with it." He stood up too. His hands had stopped shaking somewhere on the 2-mile run and hadn't started again. He didn't know what that meant. Either he'd used up all the fear or he'd moved somewhere past it into something that didn't have a name yet. He thought about the woman at Station 7, the emergency contacts in those files. He thought about 20 people in a white van right now somewhere. He thought about the collar in the desk drawer, the charging port, the small number tag. He thought about how long the night shift had been running before he noticed, how long before he'd started working there, how long the plant had been in operation, and how many cans of corn and green beans and tomatoes had moved down that line and onto trucks and into stores and into people's pantries all over the state. He got in Solis's car. She drove. He looked out the window at the ordinary morning, traffic, strip malls, a school bus making its rounds, and felt the specific vertigo of knowing something the world around him didn't know yet and might never know. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He looked at it for a long time without answering. Then he turned it off and put it in his pocket and watched the road. 3 months later, Dayton, Ohio. The Meridian pharmaceutical packaging plant ran 3 shifts. The new guard was 22, first real job out of school. He'd been told the night shift was quiet, which turned out to be true. 20 workers, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., no trouble at all. He walked the floor twice an hour and they never looked up from their stations. Focused, efficient. He figured they were just tired. The foreman was a heavy-set man who walked the floor at the start of each shift and never said much. He carried something clipped to his belt, some kind of controller, old-looking, with a screen and rows of buttons. A few of the buttons had tape over them. The guard walked past him at midnight, did his round, signed the log. Floor 1, all clear. He went back to his booth and poured coffee from his thermos and sat with it. The plant hummed, the line ran. Outside, the parking lot was empty and still, and the night was exactly as quiet as he'd been told it would be. He had no complaints.
If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like, comment, or share this video with your friends. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories like this one.